What I want to talk about at the retreat today is about sacrifice, which has been talked about many times. But I mean, I've been a missionary now for 15 years. And as we know, sacrifice is the third factor, yeah? Which means it's important. It means you can't, what's the word? You can't neglect it. That's how we say it. You can't neglect the third factor. Because it's one of the factors, yeah, it's one of the, it must be. There's death, birth, and sacrifice. So, what's interesting though is you talk to people about the third factor, most people sort of seem to think that sacrifice is just about teaching Gnosis. A very large amount of people think that third factor, if you say to someone, practicing the third factor, they're going to almost always think, yeah, teaching Gnosis. Because you sacrifice your time to teach Gnosis to the people, right? Or if you sacrifice your life to become a missionary. Well, kinda. Let's talk about it. Kinda. You see, yeah, most people think about it this way. Think about sacrifice as being to pay your karma, or as like the opportunities, looking for opportunities to work on the ego. It's a third factor. This is what the third factor is for. You can find good, when you sacrifice for other people, you create good opportunities to work on the I, or you pay your karma. That's kind of the only thing that people think about when they think about the third factor of sacrificing Gnosis. And therefore teaching Gnosis is good because why? Because you pay your karma. That's what most people think, right? When they think of sacrifice, you do it to pay your karma, right? Correct? What do you think of in the third factor? Tell me.
Do good deeds to pay the debts.
Exactly. Yeah? Because third factor is action. You can't third factor by thinking good about people. It doesn't work that way. Yeah? You can't third factor by dying silently in your meditation by yourself. That's not a sacrifice. Yeah? Not really. There's kind of sacrifice there, but if you're calling it that, you may as well give up. Yeah? Most people think about it as that. And it's interesting because it's not really correct. Yeah? So Raphael once gave us this definition. He said that to sacrifice means to choose one good superior to another. It's just a dictionary definition. But it's really good, and it's worth holding. So to make a sacrifice, yeah, means to choose one good superior to another good, to choose one thing over. And the word good is very important, yeah? It's one thing I want to do or don't want to do, whatever, to another thing that I do want to do, don't want to do. So it's one value, sacrificing one value over another value. That's what it means. One value over another value. And that's how it is, like that. I decide that I'm going to go to work. I am sacrificing the time I could be spending sitting at home. Yeah? Watching television or whatever it is I would rather be doing. Yeah? Or vice versa. If you are one of those go-getting guys, like those old Italian builders, you know what I mean? No. The new, was it Silicon Valley work ethic guys, you know what I mean? All you ever do is work. Yeah? And therefore, the idea of having to spend time with the children, you have to sacrifice your lovely work. You have to sacrifice the work that God puts you on this earth, your God being, of course, Mammon, the demon of materialism. And you have to sacrifice all those babies you normally sacrifice to him to go and look after your children. And you think, it's a big sacrifice. I'm going to go home and spend time with the wife. That's a Simpsons reference if you don't remember that one. Anyway, so it depends, right? It depends on your values, no? It might be a sacrifice for you, not for another guy. As I said, so for one guy, going to work is a sacrifice because he doesn't want to spend time with his family, because he doesn't care. He only wants to make money. So money is everything, and he sacrifices everything for money. Family, time, money, emotion, intellect, efforts. Not money. He's not for money for money. Oh, he sacrifices money to make more money, So, in that sense, yeah, on the other hand, the other person who they walk to work like this, You ever seen someone picking something, they're carrying something at work and they're like, there's a joke that the Germans make about the Austrians. It says the Austrian worker comes up to the German foreman and he says, every time I push the wheelbarrow, it goes squeak, 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 squeak. And the German foreman says, no, it goes squeak, 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 squeak. As in, move faster, you slow Austrian. They're all about that. The other one's about chasing snails, and the Austrian can't keep up with the snails. So, let's be honest, Germans aren't really known for their humor. You know what I mean? But they are known for hating the Austrians. So, anyway, except for that one Austrian. They were really into that one Austrian. Okay, continuing on. So basically, therefore, a sacrifice is about giving up one thing for another thing. That's how it works. One thing of value for another valuable thing, yeah? That's very important. So what we really need to say here as a Gnostic person, we need to understand. And before I go into that, for a lot of us, that can just be sacrificing one pain for another pain. You know what I mean? Oh, if only I could stay at home. You know, for going to work. And money. And it's just, so all values can be pain, just to be crystal clear. Because I just want to say this, because in most people's minds, the idea of sacrifice is that like classical Christ on the cross, you know, where he's like, you know, like that. You know what I mean? Like, and when people think of sacrifice, they think of this guy just nailed to a cross and just the passion that cries, oh God, not another one, you know? They don't think about, you know, giving up their seat on the bus for the elderly lady or something, you know? They think about the guy nailed to the cross, the pain. They think about going to work, having to do overtime. This is sacrifice, okay? One pain to another. Okay, all actions require sacrifice. This is the reality. The reality is literally everything that you do is a sacrifice of not doing something else. Because you live in a dualistic reality, every single thing, the fact you're at this retreat, means you are sacrificing sitting at home. You're sacrificing your weekend off, yeah? Or it's a Friday, isn't it? So you're sacrificing your day at work in order to come to the retreat. Next, you'll be sacrificing your weekend to come to the retreat. You understand? Every single thing that you do is a sacrifice of something else, irregardless of what you do. Going to work, you sacrifice home. Spending your money, you're a sacrifice spending it on something else, or simply retaining it and keeping it in like a little box under the bed. You know, and occasionally you just pull it out and you touch it. You know, and maybe you put it in a bank and occasionally you just pull out your phone, you look at it and you go, ooh, those numbers. Those are some nice numbers. You know? And so you sacrifice spending it. You sacrifice buying some nice moisturizer to touch your money instead. Yeah? You sacrifice having a nice dinner out so that you can look at your money on your phone. Yeah? You sacrifice, you know, what is it, fixing your car so you can stare at your money. You know what I mean? You go, this is good money. Yeah. So this means every single thing that you do, life itself is in a constant state of sacrificing one thing to another, which is interesting because our concept of sacrifice does not meet that at all. Our concept of sacrifice is pain, yeah? Or getting paid to be a missionary, as in with karma, not money. There's no financial gain in being a missionary, yeah? So, I don't know, unless you become like an online missionary and someone buys you a coffee or something and you have a successful YouTube channel or something like that, you know? But I've yet to really I've only seen one or two people ever do that, so I don't think it's really a thing, you know what I mean? And somewhere along the way, Gnosis disappears. But let's not go there. So, the real question, therefore, when I'm telling you about the third factor, about the practice of sacrifice in Gnosis, therefore, is not the question of, will I be a missionary or not? Yeah? Or what can I do in the group if I'm not a missionary? The question is, what am I sacrificing for? Because you're constantly in the state, that's the third factor. Yeah? How do I practice the third factor? I have to first look at what sacrifice is in my general life. What are the sacrifices that I'm making in my life? There are only really, remember, it's all in duality, right? And so we're talking about duality and we're talking about the psychological duality. We're talking about the effects in the three worlds, physical, psychological, and esoteric. We're therefore talking about solar and lunar forces. Sacrifice is supposed to be, and Samael describes it as a solar force. Right? It's in the books somewhere. I can't remember, but I know it's there. Yeah? It's there with the solar forces. Pure sacrifice, the sacrifice that we talk about as the third factor. So I'll write it on here so we've got it there. The proper third factor is a solar force. So when we say to practice the third factor of sacrifice in Gnosis, we are referring to creating and working and maintaining with a solar force in our lives. How is that solar force understood? Samael says the solar force is typified by cooperation. The lunar force is typified by resistance, desire, etc. I forgot to write resistance, so I'll write that. Resistance. It's a French thing. Yeah, resistance. So in that sense, right, the true practice of the third factor is creating a solar force inside of yourself. But to understand that, we have to understand how the lunar force works inside. Because the reality is, people will make great sacrifice for a lunar objective. Yeah? If a person's desire is strong enough, they can sacrifice huge amounts of things in their life. If a person, for instance, for the purpose of vanity, a person can completely and utterly sacrifice eating. A person can become as thin as a rake. A person can become bulimic and vomit up all of their food and have no nutrients because of the fact that vanity is so powerful inside of them that it can sacrifice everything else. You understand? But that's not really a conscious sacrifice, is it? It's not a voluntary suffering. It's a mechanical sacrifice and a mechanical suffering. Do you understand what I mean? A voluntary suffering is when I actually really understand something deeply and I've looked at it deeply and I've become conscious of it. As opposed to an involuntary where it just happens, you know? That ego has too much power and I go, oh, you know? So therefore, the value is all on vanity in that circumstance. You understand? The values are in the vanity and the other things are invaluable. Like to give an example, like for instance, I don't I don't place any value on expensive food whatsoever. You know, someone comes and gives me a really expensive cut of meat and I'll eat it, oh, that's really nice. I'll never pay for it because I put no value on it. Do you understand what I mean? Whereas other people put value on that. They go to the butcher. You know, you go to the butcher and you see all the really expensive cuts of meat. And if you don't buy those whatsoever and ever, you just buy the $20 cut every time. You look at them and think, oh yeah, they look cool. But you don't even have a concept of why you would buy that. Whereas a person who has, for instance, those values, that could be in gluttony, doesn't have to be, but it can be, yeah, then they instantly look at the good cuts and they're like, oh yeah, you know, and, oh, $50 a cut. Wow, you know, that's not too big of a deal. You know, money's just money. It's for buying things that make me happy, you know. And then once I understood that, I started to understand now people who would just not spend money at all because the value of having the money itself is more important than even eating. And so they look at it and go, meat's quite expensive. I'm now a vegan. You know what I mean? Because I want to hang on to the cash. So the value is extremely important when trying to understand how sacrifice works, because one value is superior to another. If vanity is really valuable to me, and so you could actually come into Gnosis and think that you're really great because you don't seem to have the ego of gluttony because you just never eat, right? You could have inside of yourself, you value everybody really liking you, the good ego of self-love, a very simple ego to have, and therefore everyone likes you, so you can feel like you're a good Gnostic, making lots of sacrifices all the time, yeah, because you want everyone to like you, and yet you seem to have gotten nowhere in the third factor. I know, I have this ego. It makes me a good worker. I've never been fired, ever. Yeah, I have walked off many jobs when I had anxiety and stuff like this because of me working so hard to have everyone like me. Just eventually flips on itself and I just walk off. I can see the other self-love men in the room going, oh yeah, I can relate, eh? Yeah, walking off, mate. Yeah, that's it. You know what I mean? I still feel a little bit bad though. I wish they'd like me. So, yeah, because I place value in that. I place value in having other people like me. Therefore, it's easy to sacrifice. You can work harder. You can put more effort. You can look at the current Gen Zers. Sorry for the thing called Gen Z. When does Gen Z start?
1999.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Just
I'm not there.
Okay. You know, but everybody looks at the Gen Zers and goes, "Oh my God, you guys have no work ethic. You know, you can't work, and you don't care. Could you just stop out and turn the urns boiling over out there like crazy? Eh? There's water going everywhere. Just turn it down a little bit. Down to 70. So, anyway, so you know, we may not. I can look at them and say, oh. Look at these guys, they don't value working, they don't value... When in reality, they probably just have less self-love. Do you understand what I mean? They don't give a shit that people don't like them and they're quite happy just to sit on their phone and do nothing because there's no value there to sacrifice. They just don't care. Do you understand what I mean? No, I've worked with people like that and I go, don't you care what people think? Don't you care about the fact that everyone in this room thinks you're an idiot? Does that not bother you? And they're like, nah. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of envy you a little. There's a little bit of envy here, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I dislike you a lot, but there's a lot of envy too. Yeah? Because I wish I didn't care. you know. But that's the thing, right? It's just one good superior to another. They don't value that. They value Nike, and they value what is it? They value money, and they value being an influencer and getting lots of money for doing nothing or whatever. But they have their values. You understand what I mean? Yeah. And therefore, I'm willing to. Everything else doesn't have value, so I happily sacrifice it. That's it. Yeah. No. Simple, right? Okay. So, in that sense, a person who is completely and utterly obsessed with materialism can make huge sacrifices for materialism. They can have lots of stuffs, yeah? They can have everything. They can have all the things they're looking for. Then they're willing to sacrifice all of their time. They can sacrifice other people for that, yeah? Someone was telling me just before about a guy who was running a cafe or something, making a restaurant, and he was making all his money by just underpaying all the workers. So he was making an extra $5 an hour for every single worker by underpaying them by $5. He was getting really rich. So obviously you can see he's happy to, he makes a sacrifice there of the other people, of what they think of him, of how they feel about him, in order to make money for his materialism. And you can still be a good materialist. Yeah? Remember Stewie talked to us about the good materialists? You can still, of course, be a good materialist. So you can sacrifice absolutely everything, but still be a nice person about it. Doesn't matter. Yeah? You have lots of things for lots of people, for absolutely everybody. It's fantastic. But in the end, your sacrifices are not true sacrifices because they are lunar. They are only for moving and continuing the process of the ego. And to go one step further, because it's lunar, it's just about continuing the process of nature. Yeah. Have a nice car, have a nice house, have a nice everything. Yeah. And what do I sacrifice? And I can sacrifice all my time, my efforts in the process and everything like that. I can do great sacrifice, yeah? But if someone says to you, sacrifice for the being, sacrifice truly for your fellow man, because you see there's a problem in here. There's a massive, massive problem. And this problem is called personal gain. This is what typifies a lunar sacrifice. Unfortunately, it also counts in Gnosis. I mean, I can talk. It's like here. Have you ever seen men, for instance? You know, and you know, there's you know, a woman wants their help, you know, but she's not attractive, so they don't do anything, you know. But then if there's the attractive hitchhiker. That's such a good example. Yeah, the attractive hitchhiker. Yeah. There's like a guy who puts his thumb out and you're like, oh, ridiculous, you know what I mean? You know, the attractive girl puts her thumb out, you know what I mean? And there's 5 guys backed up and they're trying to, you know, some guy's trying to like tailgate, he's pushing the other guy out of the way with his much bigger case. My car's bigger, my car's bigger, get in here, beautiful looking European thing, yeah? And so, because of sexual desire, I make sacrifice. Usually I don't want people, no one gets in my car. You know what I mean? We never had cars like in the Gold Coast, you know, get cars with heavy tinting. You got black windows, black front. You know, sometimes I'm standing next to the road and it's like you don't know if they're saying go because the front windshield now is blacked out as well. And you're like looking at and they're just going like, and you can't tell because you can't even see them. And those cars are finally arriving in Byron. It's a nightmare. You try to walk across the road and you can't see them. It's blacked out side, blacked out front, blacked out everything, you know? So, yeah, okay, I'm happy. I've seen that before. I've been standing at the road, you know. You got the wife with the children trying to walk across the road. She can't walk across the road because no, all the cars, shoo, 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 shoo. You know what I mean? The sexy Byron girl starts, you know, clopping along, you know, and she's not just looking at her phone. 5 cars stop instantly, bang, like that, crash into the one behind, trash, you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, yep, let her go, yeah? So I can make sacrifices if there's a personal gain. Maybe I could cop a look. You know what I mean? Like that, you know what I mean? Yeah. That's it. That's your ego of lust. You know what I mean? I just let it out just so you could see it for a second and stuff it back down. Yeah? So there's personal gain. I said, I can work my entire life making money, etc., because there's personal gain. You can sacrifice your entire life for your children because then they're going to love you. Or because I'm going to make the perfect child. You know? I'm not going to make the child my parents made, this broken thing. I'm going to work hard and make something perfect that will change everything. And then your child goes, F you, I'm going to go and be gay. And you're like, how could this happen? You know what I mean? I gave everything to you. I did everything for you. You know what I mean? And suddenly we see there was personal gain somewhere. We may not even know what it was. Yeah? We had a concept, like my dad always used to say that. We try to raise a child and they turn around and go F you when they're a teenager and walk out. And we're like, all I ever did was love you. It's like, did you though? If you're in so much pain right now and you're quite angry with them. So what's the vested interest? What were you going to get out of them? I mean, it's tricky. Gnostic people, you always want your kids to be Gnostics, but maybe not. Yeah, maybe they won't be. So what do you want for them to be, really?
Happy.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God. Whole room? Happy. You just have to give them the tools to find their own happiness. Yeah? Of course you'd be happier if you have the Gnostic teaching. That's why I teach them. But I've seen people like that, they don't want to teach the kids, they want the kids so much to be in Gnosis that they don't even teach them Gnosis. Because they're worried they might not come to Gnosis. If I teach them Gnosis, they might not come to Gnosis when they're older. I know lots of people that have kids like that. They don't do them to Gnosis because they want to make sure they make their own decision. They don't want to push it down. I'm like, man, you need to teach them psychology, so just bring them. That's just it, you know? My kids are fighting to get in there. They're actually usually sitting in the front seat during all the classes, you know? You have to fight to keep them out. I remember with Serena and Hetty during the mediation sessions with what's his name, with their father. I remember where they were. He said that they he put in the mediation. He goes, "There's a lock on their door. They lock them in so they can do their weird Gnostic cult stuff." And then my parents laughed. They said, "No, the lock is in the house, is in between the house and the centre. We're locking them out because they try to force their way in. We're not locking them away. We're not actually locking them in their rooms. We're just locking the centre because they come running down and, Mom, please, there's a fly and it's annoying me. Mom, please." And if we didn't lock them out, they'd run in and just sit there in the front row and just be completely involved in everything. We actually had to lock them out so we could go and do a meditation. Or they run into the meditation room and sit there with us, you know, and not stop moving and fidgeting. So in that sense, you know, as I said, there's a personal gain. The ambitious person is looking for a position. And so you can put yourself through immense pain and difficulty as long as there is a gain. The skateboarder knackers himself day after day after day to stick the perfect grind. Do you know what I mean? The person covered in, the surfer covered in sunburn, skin peeling from his eyeballs. You know what I mean? So that he can do the sick twist, mate, or whatever it's called, or ride the barrel, man. You know what I mean? Sick swell. Yeah? As I said, it's exactly the same. I can put myself through all of it as long as there's a win in, and I can go one step further, you know what I mean? I can put myself through hours and hours of meditation as long as I get a good astral experience from it. And you say to yourself, Mick, how's that a bad thing? I'm doing 3 hours meditation a day. Isn't that great? And I go, that's cool. What's your wife doing while you're doing 3 hours meditation a day? I don't know. The dishes, she's cooking your dinner, she's sorting out the kids. But you need that 3 hours meditation a day. You just can't cope. And this is what people do. They say, no, darling, I have to sacrifice. I have to do my esoteric practices and all my exercises. You know something that's very interesting about Samael is Samael did his work at night. Do you know this about Samael? Samael didn't really sleep. He did most of his esoteric exercise. You remember when people asked about Samael, how much should you meditate? It was Oscar, I believe, asked it. And remember his answer?
6 hours.
6 hours a day? Kind of. He says, almost all night. Remember? To meditate during that. He's meditating, but what was more is, do you know what Samael did with most of his time? Because his lectures are quite short. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, he did a lot of practices, but you know what he was doing? He was helping. He was just helping people. He was doing things with people. He was taking them around. He was teaching them. He was working with them. He gave lectures and classes, but then when you start to add that up, it's like he was just doing things with people constantly. He was always active. His third factor wasn't just about giving great lectures. You know what I mean? And most of it, as I said, his main meditation work he did at night or towards the end of the night and in the early morning so that he had the day for the people. Do you know what I mean? He actually allocated, of course he did practices during the day as well. He did them with the people too. But a lot of it was just spending time with them, working with them, helping them. That was the third factor. Giving up his time and his efforts and putting his efforts into assisting his fellow man and working for his fellow man. Yeah, I've seen that justification huge amounts of times, saying, oh, no, I've got to do my meditation now, so you take the kids away from me so that I can do my meditation. You take the kids away from me so I can do my study. You know what I mean? And people ask me that all the time, what do I do, what do I do, what do I do? I said, do it in your own time. What's my own time? Cut a bit of time out of your sleep. No, not my sleep. No, my 8 hours. I might have slight bags. You know, I can't do that. Why would you even suggest that, you know? And so this is a tricky little game because I'm going to be honest with you, only really you can answer this question about whether or not you get personal gain out of it. Only you can answer that. No one can tell you, but you can be sneaky. You know, like when you, I don't know, like you buy something for someone, but then you're actually claiming it on tax and you don't mention it. You know, like you make it, oh, you take all this, but it's like, nice, I bought all those materials on tax. You know what I mean? They pay you back. And you're like, no, don't mention it. But deep down, you kind of get a bit of a kickback from that. I remember when I've been asked this question many times. People say, "Can I get can I claim my Gnostic donations on tax?" I say, "Can I claim my donation? Can I claim it back on tax?" You know, because you do the math on, oh, that's not bad. I might get it back out of, I can get sort of a piece of that back out of my tax return. You know what I mean? And they tried to do that in Adelaide. They actually went through the process of trying to make the Gnostic Society Adelaide into a non-for-profit organisation, a registered non-for-profit, and therefore everyone could claim all their donational tax. And we could also go one step further. We might not even have to donate, right? Get this ready, because it would be supported by the government. You know what I mean? It would be supported by the government, and so and Sean would get a wage as a Gnostic priest. You know what I mean? And he would be looked after. And when we don't even have to donate to the Gnosis anymore. You know what I mean? And it's an interesting sort of game. They went really far into it, but it turned out we were going to have to be doing really large amounts of, what's the word? Like government, like accountability, reporting. And then Dad started looking at the reports. He's like, no, you're basically letting the government into our house doing this. They could actually take everything from us. They could ban us. You know what I mean? If someone complains, we can then be banned. We're then a registered religion, and we can be banned as a state religion, and then suddenly we're now actually not allowed. We can actually be removed. Like, this is really, you shouldn't be doing all this so you can save at the time. Ready? $10 a week. That's what it was back then. They were doing all this to save a tenner. But $10 a week. That's like equivalent of, I think, $5 now. You know, in inflation or whatever, probably $2.50. Whatever. I can't believe it. You know what I mean? So in that sense, yeah, only you can really see whether or not you're going to get personal gain, because a true sacrifice has no personal gain. Do you know what I mean? You may get something afterwards, but not for personal gain. Do you know what I mean? We're actually doing it to help our fellow man, because a sacrifice must be something that is unidirectional, meaning I'm giving something out. I'm giving of, and what do we give of? My time, my efforts, my emotional energy, my intellectual energy, my money, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be, it's a combination or one or two, whatever. I'm giving of something. And remember what the Christ says, when your left hand gives, don't let your right hand know. Yeah, you're giving with one, and it just goes one way. That's it. That energy, that time, that effort. You know, we do like a gardening bee, and we just go and do it, yeah? And then someone says, sorry, we're cancelling lunch. And we go, no problem, I'll just go get something around down the block, instead of like, but we always have a barbecue and the meat's so delicious. You know, why did I even do this? Why did I give my time, my efforts? Yes.
Remember the moving day you did once, and you were like too broke to buy it.
I was actually completely broke.
Had a meltdown.
Yeah. It's true, we did a moving day once, and I was so broke. I'd lost my job. I quit my job earlier, and we actually just hit this point. I had nothing. I had no money. And we were moving. I said, it wasn't, you know, like when you say, oh, we can't afford that. I mean, I literally had zero. I had like $5 in my bank account. And I had her on moving there. And I remember someone started having a go at me and carrying on and going, how are you everyone to come here? You're not giving them lunch. I said, I have nothing. I said, you can eat what's in my fridge, but there's nothing in there either. I'm waiting to get paid. I've got nothing. And luckily one of the guys said, oh, okay. And he just went off and got a bunch of chickens and wraps and all this sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Just did after he realized, you know, I did have to show him my bank account though. He didn't believe me at first, but that's all good. You know? But you know what I mean? It's that sense. So we want a payment, you know, that it used to just be that sometimes the payment was its own thing. Yeah. See, what's very important Yeah, is we have to understand what it means to cooperate. What it means to cooperate. Because in our world now, we're becoming just so unbelievably like sentient. Everyone's like living on separate hills, you know, little, it's like, you ever play that game Worms? Everyone's living on little hills, you know, with their guns sort of looking at each other and trying to fire stuff at each other. Like everyone's just sort of separated. Yeah, everyone's living on their little hills with their little phones, you know what I mean? Like that, texting each other like that, you know? I tried to call a shop to order some takeaway and you couldn't call, you had to order it online. And because I ordered it online, it was a bigger order and they didn't know what to do. It's like a whole mess. I could have just called them. I could have said, hey, I've got this big order. Can we sort it out? No, you can't call because that would require breaking the fence. I'd have to come over to your castle. You're not allowed inside my castle. It's my castle. Get away. You know what I mean? You might pique my anxiety. You know what I mean? And so, you know, everyone's saying, really, cooperation is actually a natural state. That's the natural state. And cooperation means we cooperate, remember sometimes we cooperate with the environment. Like for instance, as I said, if we're in an environment and everyone's here working, then we just work. Do you know what I mean? If we're in an environment, everyone's studying, we sit down and we do some study with it. We don't start dancing. You know, but this is the whole thing that's like, you know, play your drum, dance to the beat of your own drum, man. And you see this, you know, like you go sometimes and everyone's doing something, and then there'll just be like some whack job, like drugged off their tits, like just dancing. It's so common here in Byron. Like, you know, you go to the beach, right? What is the activity of the beach? If it's, you know what I mean?
Volleyball. Kicking a ball. Swimming,
leisure, yeah. It's just enjoying the sunshine. If it's cold, maybe just standing, going for a little walk, you know what I mean? And yet you go down the beach, and what are some people doing? Yeah? We went down the beach, and you know what people were doing? They were smoking marijuana and dancing. You know what I mean? It's like freezing cold outside, and they're like... And the music's so loud because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, this isn't co-op. There's children here. So even if we were to say that there's a possible cooperation to taking drugs, which there isn't, but let's say, for instance, that there is, that taking drugs, it's not a child environment, is it? Yeah? Having a sesh isn't a childlike environment. As a lady once said to me, she goes, oh, you know, every night I get the kids in bed and it's time to have my bong. And I was like, I looked at her, I said, you're a terrible parent. It was back when you could still say that and someone wouldn't try to kill you. I said, you're a terrible parent. She's like, no, I'm not. I make sure the kids are asleep. I said, yeah, but what happens when they wake up for a glass of water and you're like, hey, no, it's water, yeah. What about like some milk? Like, I'm starving, eh? I could totally have some with you. Why don't we like make pancakes? Yay! Do you know what I mean? Like what the hell, man? But it's like you're there. You're not actually cooperating with the environment, yeah? You're there. It's a beautiful sunset. You should be admiring the sunset. Instead, you're there like with your phone going... You know, you go down to the sunset at Byron, there's just a ton of people with their phones. Someone got angry at us because my children were walking through their shot. My children were running and playing on the rocks, and like, they're ruining my perfect shot of the Byron lighthouse with the sunset. You know, and it's like, actually, my children are cooperating with the environment. They're at the beach and they're running and they're enjoying the wind, and they're allowing the wind to blow through them, and they're running upon the stones and they're throwing sand and they're laughing and cavorting and being happy. You know what I mean? And you're busy like uploading something to Facebook or Instagram. You're not in the moment. You're actually not cooperating. If you go into someone's house and just sit on your phone, you're not cooperating, you know? You know, like this, you're not cooperating, you know? You're not actually part of the environment. People don't do that anymore. We're so unbelievably uncooperative now. People don't even know how to cooperate. They go to someone's house and like, oh, I don't know, I'll just sit on my phone. That's not cooperation. You look around and see what's going on. Okay, we're tidying up or we're setting up for dinner. Okay, I'll go get the plates. Do you know what I mean? This is cooperation. We work inside the environment. It's the same thing. We all sit here for the meditation. We sit down, we're quiet, and we meditate. Yeah? I have to teach people that. Because people don't do that. They come down, it's like, you know, you sit down, it's time for a quiet meditation, someone gets up to find a better chair. And they're rustling around. I need like 6 cushions. Someone, can you give me 7 cushions? You know what I mean? Excuse me, I need 7 cushions and 4 blankets. I'm just not my bag, you know what I mean? Maybe I'll just kind of go like this, you know, like that, like this. Yeah, that's good. And then, stretch it out. Oh yeah, that's the stuff, you know? And this happens when I start new classes, this happens all the time. You know what I mean? I remember once I set this whole room up, it was like 20 chairs. And it was a bit of a dud class, only 5 people showed up. But they were all like, it was a burly, and they were all burly chicks. And so they all like refused to sit on chairs. So I'd set up 20 chairs, right, in the middle of the room, and they all walked in, you know, because very straight, like I said, they're ballerinas, even though they didn't do any of that. And then they, you know, and then they went and got the cushions off the chairs and then put them on the ground and sat up against the wall. So I'm trying to give a lecture, and I'm like, and there's like one guy sitting in the back row, all the way over there, and then 5 women up against here. That's not cooperation. Come and sit in the front. You know what I mean? We don't cooperate anymore. We don't know how to cooperate like that. I don't cooperate and do that communist stuff. You know what I mean? I'm an individual. I will beat of my own drum. No, man. You need to learn to cooperate with the environment. You'd be much happier that way. So cooperation is a solar force. Yeah. The next point, it has Christic values. The next point is to work from love. Yeah. A sacrifice comes from love. That's the other side. When we're actually looking at a sacrifice where I can do something, I'm looking at it from the position of love and compassion. Yeah, can I actually do something in this circumstance to help a person out? Do you know what I mean? To actually work, or to like the closest you get to that in the mundane world is can I pay it forward? You know, can I do something and they can pay it forward? You know, that's the closest we sort of get. But to actually just do something to help someone for just the sake of it. You know, as I once said to my friend, who's a really, really hard-working German guy. I said, my son is just like you. He said, oh, come on, Mick, there's no one like me. And I said, because I was trying to ask him about what it was like growing up being a really hard-working Pisces in Germany, because my son's very hard-working. And I was just asking him about sort of some things to raise him. And I said, my son is just like you. He believes that a hard day's work is its own reward. And there was like a pause, and he goes, this is exactly my psychology, because this is exactly how I feel, you know, and it's true. I've had him around my house, and he's just the guy who goes, oh, I remember once he came to our house and the door was like misaligned. It was like not closing very well. And I saw him like, because his wife was coming to do something else, and then he tried to like help with what she was doing, and Rochelle kicked him out. She's like, this is a ladies' area. He's like, okay, so it's fine. I'll just show you something. And he like kind of walks off, and then he's just there, and it's like this door. And the next day when he came back, he had like an industrial sander, and like gloves, and then like a stain. You know what I mean? And he came and he goes, oh, Michael, could you help me for a second? And like he took the door off with a screwdriver, and then he puts it on a wheelbarrow, and then he's there like sanding, he puts it back on, rehangs it, and then he's checking. He's like standing, he's just checking the thing. Like, oh, look. 1 more millimeter, and he does this, and then he in himself, you know what I mean, he has this natural state of cooperation and work, and hard work being its own reward. Nowadays, I have seen so many times, I've seen these things on Facebook and Instagram going, the only reward for working hard in your job is working harder, is them giving you more work and more responsibility, like that's a bad thing. It's not. And they're fleecing you. No, they're paying you. The hell is wrong with people's way of thinking? This is insanity. This is 100%, this is insane because it doesn't even adhere to basic sacrifice of like trying to get money and stuff. Again, this is trying to alter people's values and change the way they understand it. But in reality, actually, because this brings us to our point of activity versus inactivity, yeah, the most dangerous ego of all to sacrifice, which is that of laziness, yeah, which is simply not wanting to do something because it would be better to do nothing. This is like the key problem with trying to sacrifice, trying to teach people how to sacrifice. Like, yeah, but what about, like, just hear me here. I know you're talking about activity and cooperation, but what about, ready? What about doing nothing? Huh? Hey, you go home, you lie down, it's nice. Yeah? Or the Gnostics thing. I'm sorry, I can't help, I gotta do a practice. You know? You know, oh yeah, no, sorry. Oh, I know everyone's doing this pack up, but I just got to go to my car and do a practice for this lunch break. You know, yeah, oh no, we're doing everything. Oh, I've got to go. I've got to get out of here. This is this thing. This whole thing, yeah, inside of ourselves, right? It's activity versus inactivity. It's the chop wood, carry water. It's the importance of, see, inside of us. I understand where it comes from. I saw it once in myself. I saw that the desire for inactivity is actually a desire to go back to the absolute, because we want to be back within the repose of the great absolute. But it's also a misunderstanding of that force, yeah? Because the reality is it's actually activity that takes us back there. It's the force of working on ourselves. Like Aaron talked about earlier, saying that feeling that we're going to eventually be able to just relax and do nothing in the absolute is insane. So remember what Samael says, when you get back to the absolute, the real work begins. You know what I mean? So in and of itself, right? In and of itself, what was I going to say? In and of itself, yeah. So in this self, when I'm making a real sacrifice, I am simply doing something like that and it's just going out. I'm teaching people, I'm working for people, I'm helping people, but also it's something very active, meaning that I'm actually looking for opportunities to make a sacrifice. And I'm going to give an example here, because in ourself, there's that thing, and this is what I mean here by being asked versus a calling. Many Gnostic people in themselves will say, okay, you know, I'm happy to sacrifice, but I just haven't got an opportunity to do it. There's no moment in which I can do it. You know, like, and I've had this. I remember having that conversation with, I don't want to use the name, but a friend of mine. And I remember him saying, oh, but the situations don't come up. And I started saying to him, well, mate, why don't you actually make those situations? You know, and I remember he was talking about like giving blood. This is a long time ago, way long ago. He's talking about giving. It was you guys' friend. He was talking about giving blood, but then he read in the book that Samael says not to do that because you karmically link. He's like, so how else am I supposed to sacrifice? You know what I mean? Because but what it is it's wanting to make a sacrifice, but without actually sacrifice. So I'm happy to sacrifice some of my time, but I don't really want to sacrifice my efforts, or I don't want to sacrifice my intellectual efforts. You know, and so as an example, around that same time, I remember one of our friends, Christy, who's now a missionary in Japan, teaching a beautiful group in Kamakura. I remember we were having a hard time having special sandals that we have made. And because no one was doing it. One guy sort of started doing it, and he made the sacrifice of his time. He started making them. Do you know what I mean? But he also didn't really want to sacrifice too much of his time to actually learn how to do it properly. So we were getting these giant duck feet things that just didn't fit. And so she actually went out of her way, and Byron's a great place for learning leatherworking, and went and did a full leatherworking course. So she sacrificed her money to pay for the course. She sacrificed her money to buy the materials and all the things. She sacrificed huge amounts of time, her effort, intellectual effort, learning how to do something that she wants. Because people say all the time, you know, someone might say to you like, hey, I need help with this. Like as an example, for a while I've been complaining that it's quite hard to edit the lectures, and then Hamish says, oh, I'll learn how to do it and then I can edit them for you. Do you know what I mean? I'm actually, whereas you may sit there and go, oh, he needs help with that. Oh, pity, I don't know how to do that. It's like, well, you could learn. Do you know what I mean? We have time, but I need to learn how to do this. And this happens all the time. You go, oh, well, I don't really have the skills, so I'll just sort of leave that. That comes from a society that's been way too mollycoddled. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, someone who, you know, like it's like in Australia where you see a pothole and you go, oh, someone just sort that out. The same guy, remember Mr. Hard Day's Work, had a pothole outside his house. He called the council 3 times. They didn't do it. So you know what happened? He filled the pothole. And he didn't just fill the pothole. He did it beautifully. It never came back. You know, he carefully did it. He parked it in. He went and like hired a whacker packer to do the last part to make sure it was really flat, you know, checking it on the road. This is good. You know what? And you know what he told me? He said his grandfather did the same thing. He called the council where he was back in East Germany. They didn't fix it, so he just fixed it all. He just fixed the whole road himself. Him and his friends just came and like dug up the road and like redid it and relaid it, and this looks good. Good weekend's work. Now we can have the beer. You know what I mean? Because we did the hard job, yeah? But you just figure it out. I mean, we live in the age of YouTube where you can literally learn anything in like half an hour to a few hours. And yet still people are like, yeah, I don't know how to do that. I got no idea. You know, and this is the thing, you know? That's how I became a handyman. I just started watching YouTube videos, and then failure. Failure teaches a lot. Do you know what I mean? Failure is a beautiful teacher, yeah? And now I'm a handyman. So's Aaron because of that. And now Anthony's learning as well. You know what I mean? Ta-da! All we've got to do is just sacrifice a bit of time, a bit of effort, and we can do it. And we just go one way. That's what happened. I remember when I was first thinking about hiring Aaron, I was thinking, oh, I don't know, he doesn't really know what he's doing. It's going to be hard. And you know what my dad said? My dad said, yeah, it's a good sacrifice. In other words, just help him and don't think about what you're going to get back. Do you understand what I mean? Just help him and don't think about what you're going to get back in this circumstance. Dad pointed out that at that time, Aaron really needed the help. He didn't really have anything as far as like a what do you call it, like a career job, you know, something that's a little bit more, you know, as he said, he'd been pushing trolleys and then working in a bakery and delivery driving, you know what I mean? This is something you could actually really use. And so it made sense in that moment to do something that was unidirectional. Whereas if I make it occasionally this would try to jump in. I'd try to say, oh, you know, I want to make more money back, or I want to have, you know, more praise, etc. But again, this isn't a real sacrifice. A true sacrifice, a sacrifice really in the third factor, goes one way. I teach the group, and if they all turn around and go, you're a fool, you go, all right, next group. Yeah? And we just keep going. And I say, well, hopefully that something went into the essence, it'll help them in another life or later on in life, and then we just keep going. Yeah? I know people get really attached to their students. They want to have all good students. They get super attached, they go around to their houses and become their friends and all this sort of stuff, and that's great. But at the same time, then when the person leaves, like, you know, like our friends, well, I can't say who they were, who've gone somewhere, but like that, they got really attached to this student of theirs, you know what I mean? Really attached. And then the student left and they said, oh, you know, and then like the student said, oh, they were talking about how bad ayahuasca is. And he's like, I'm going to go and do it just because you guys don't want me to. You know? And they're like, oh no, what have we done? Oh, poor me. Yeah, again, we're allowing it to be a bi-directional thing. I remember a friend of mine who's a missionary. He said he once wrote a Facebook post, early days of Facebook. He wrote a Facebook post, literally, he made a graph, a full graph of all the donations he had received from his introductory classes, and then did things like worst donation, best donation, and did it by like amount of people. So like 50 people came and received this much money, therefore it was 10 cents per person, and all this sort of stuff. He did this huge thing, and it was just like, I remember someone else commented on it, wow, this is really thorough. And I was a friend of his, and I just said, man, I think I just called him and said, man, you should probably take that down. You know, it's just a little bit in bad taste, don't you think? He said, it took me a while to do. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I understand that I can understand you're in a bad place. You're probably having some financial difficulties right now. You know, I'm like, why don't you just like ask for the donation instead of just, you know, but, sorry? Yeah, but so in that sense, he's really, really, really suffering. So yeah, I'm doing it, but I'm expecting a return. You know what I mean? I'm expecting the person to get to a certain level, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this takes me to my little point here. I wanted to mention this as well. And this can sound very harsh, but I'm saying it mostly because everyone in here wants to be a missionary. Not everyone. We're teaching many people who want to be missionaries. So the missionary is the de facto job of the third factor, really. Do you know? It's a job of literally giving your whole life for the third factor, which means you give your whole life to work to spread the solar force, to spread the solar ideology. I'm teaching people a life of cooperation. I'm teaching them a life of constantly giving and not asking for things in return, of constantly working. And I just realized I do need to mention the difference between like a silly sacrifice and something that's serious. I'll mention that in a minute. But at the same time, we're giving up and we're teaching that way. But we have to be quite careful because of the spiritual egos, yeah? Mystical pride, this sort of thing. And so as a missionary, we have to remember that we're a servant. That's what you are. Even the king, you know, the king is the servant of his people. The people love him. That's why they follow him. Remember what they say in Narnia to King Peter? To be first into battle and last in retreat. That's such a deep thing. And the same thing, I remember Rafael Vargas once said, he said, if you want to be a missionary, your internal work makes up 60% of the group. Why is that important?
Because the people are running off the force of your work.
That's right. But also, if they overcome, then what happens? You have chaos. Do you know what I mean? If I don't have the force to, if my force isn't making up 60% of the group, then the group is stronger. Then the group will start to just sort of make its own decisions, and you're just going to get cut out of your own group. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's like when you have like a committee, like who runs like a corporation or something, and you start it, and then you somehow give all your board seats away to other people. Then suddenly the group's going to go over there, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I thought I started this thing. Do you know? You have to work even. So that means what? If you get really strong students, you have to work harder. Yeah. It also means if you have if you feel like your group's not getting anywhere, there's really only one person to look at. Yeah, me. 100%, right? In my group, if I feel like my group's, I can't look at those people and go, oh, you're not doing anything. Yeah, because it's me. I need to push them. Yeah, I need to push them. I need to push harder. I need to work harder on myself to inspire and work for them. At the same time, you can't stand up there and say, oh, you guys should work harder. You guys should work harder. That's not going to work. You need to work harder. Yeah? You want the group to work harder? Get up at bloody 5, get up at 4, get up at 3. Do your practices. Yeah, work really hard on yourself and then you can deal. This is the way it works. Yeah, try all that before trying to tell everyone else they need to change. As opposed to the Pharisee, yeah, who is the person who wants, in a sense, like in the servant, it's I make sacrifices for others. I sacrifice myself for others. Whereas the Pharisee way of thinking is, everybody's so lucky to have me. And you gotta be careful. People tell you that, don't let it get to you. Just remember, you have to remember, when someone tells you that, don't forget to say to yourself, they don't know what I'm really like. That's what you have to say to yourself as a missionary. When people say that to me, people say, oh man, you've done a great job there. I'm like, you got no idea. You got no idea what goes on in here. You don't know what I was up to last night. You know what I mean? You should have seen the horrible thoughts I've had. You know what I mean? And then you wouldn't think that. You know what I mean? Yeah? So in that sense, whereas opposed to the Pharisee, which is others make sacrifices for me, you're lucky to have me. Yeah? There's no only Gnosis in this country because I'm here. You know, that's not how you think about it. I know no missionaries who think that way. I'm not going to learn your language because I don't see the point. You need to learn Gnosis and I've got the Gnosis, so you should learn my language. Come on. Por favor, man. Yeah. Learn the language. Understand the people. Understand them. Teach to their hearts. You know, be with them. You see who are the most. You see these hugely successful guys. Like for instance, as an example, like okay, Caesar gets a really bad rap all the time nowadays because everyone wants to tear him down. But the reality is, Caesar started off as a soldier amongst the other men. Do you know what I mean? What does that mean? Like, think about that. What does that mean? That means that he was one of them. He was with them. They loved him. The people crowned him. He didn't even have to go for the crown. They gave it to him. At the time, there was always a trimerty, meaning you had 3 people always in charge of Rome. And he was the first one to be solely in charge for a very short period of time. Like a day. They stabbed him. But you know what I mean? Yeah, but the people, they adored him because he was with them, because he gave himself for them. He was there on the front lines. He worked for them. He gave himself to the people. You see what I mean? I'm sure he had pride, etc. But at the same time, this is what really works. So if I'm signing up to be a missionary because I want everyone to say I'm such a fantastic guy, give up now. That's just not how it works. It's the other way around. I need to serve. And this is, my energies go out once. I can't expect that return. If you get it, be happy. When someone gives it back, I feel so happy. It's lovely. You know, I'm not saying not because I want it, but because I can see now that they are learning to give. Do you know what I mean? They are learning themselves. I'm hoping that they're learning this. You know what I mean? So when you see someone starting to naturally give their time, to naturally work on themselves, to actually take up that work and actually take it as their own, and then learn to sacrifice, learn to give up their time. So in the beginning, we make little sacrifice. You know, we give a bit of our time for Gnosis. You know, we start giving up a bit of our efforts. We give up a little bit of our ego. But the thing is, we have to keep giving more and more and more and more and more. Yeah, more and more and more. So, yeah. What was I going to say? Do we have any questions about that at this point?
I think you were going to talk about a silly sacrifice in it.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. So there is one caveat in this understanding, yeah? Which is that, like all things in Gnosis, you must have consciousness, yeah? You have to really think about something and question yourself constantly, yeah? This is the problem. When you're always sure of yourself, you never work on yourself because you're so sure of yourself all the time. You can't just work on yourself when you're unsure. That's a terrible way, yeah? I mean, I've got a trick, which is I just constantly make myself unsure, and then I always have to work on myself. You know what I mean? This is the little trick I use, yeah? Rather than like, okay, I only work on myself going badly, because then you don't really work, and then, you know what I mean? Like, you don't work when you're feeling good, which is usually when you're getting, the knife is slowly coming behind you. Do you know, like, you're like, oh yeah, man, I'm killing this lust. It's feeling great. I haven't thought about it in weeks. I haven't even done a hamster. Don't need to. I think I'm giving up on hamster. I've clearly transmuted all. Oh God! Oh no! Lust! No! You know what I mean? Yeah, like the examples I gave. I went to do a simple quote. The lady said, "Come round, just go look at the deck." I step on the deck, and there's a naked woman right there. I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, there's lust. Okay, there you go." Sorry, be so bad. No, that's fine. Come in. I really don't want to. This may blow your mind, but I'm actually not really. This isn't what I want to do today. You know, I actually just want to look at this deck because I'm actually here to look at the deck. That's crazy. I know this may blow your mind, young lady, but I'm actually here to look at the deck. So I'm just going to measure the deck and I'm going to leave. But you know, you say, yeah, so you think you've got it all together, mate. You're working on it all, and then bam, curveball. Yeah, so what's going to happen? And as he said, lust has been like just positioning itself behind you, you know what I mean? Like Caesar, yeah, it's been slowly getting behind the pillars, you know, with the little swords waiting, you know, the Ides of March, and then bang, that's it, da-da-da-da-da. And then you know, oh, et tu, you know what I mean? Et tu, sense of calm. Et tu, thinking I've got this under control. You too? Oh no, ego of making me feel like everything's fine. Yeah, et tu, pride. I thought you were on my side. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So, anyway, as I was saying, there's something else to understand, which is that we have to be conscious of ourselves. I have to be conscious of what I'm doing. And look, as I said, if I want to increase, if I feel like I'm weak in the third factor, okay, we need to start to look around at where I can increase my work in the third factor. If I'm working with people, am I pushing them to their limit? Am I putting all of my efforts into the group? Am I working enough in the third factor? But then there's also, we have to be careful of becoming a stupid saint, meaning that I have to also be smart, if you understand what I mean. Because, you know, at the same time, the woman who lets her son, you know, lets her son steal absolutely everything, like let's say her son, you know, lets her son live at home until he's 40 and he's like a thief or a drug addict. Yeah, she's making great sacrifices, do you understand what I mean? But at the same time, they're not for a good purpose. Do you see what I mean? They have no purpose. If the sacrifice helps me to actually, you know, that's one thing. Sorry. Let me change what I was saying. So that sacrifice has no purpose. It has no real work to it. It has no results. Yeah, and this is tricky what I'm saying, because your mind, the problem is the mind can use anything to justify it, so you're just going to have to learn. Yep, the mind can say, oh, I'm not going to sacrifice my own because they're just going to take everything from you. Well, that's on you, man. But the reality is, we have to be a little bit careful. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, using my example as the missionary, if a person has promise, if they're really applying all of their work and they're doing I've had students who put all the time and effort in, they want to become missionaries, they're doing all of the practices, they're actually really working, they're asking decent questions, then I give them a lot of my time. Do you know what I mean? But I've had envious people come in the group and then try to take my time just for the fact that they see the other person getting all the time and they want it. Do you know what I mean? I had a person come to class who was like that. They just wanted to take all my time, and I could see that it was because of envy. It wasn't an actual natural impulse. That person didn't actually, they weren't going anywhere. They weren't applying any of the teachings. They weren't doing absolutely anything whatsoever. So what's the point? And you have to be quite careful. You don't give all, like for instance, one thing that has happened quite a few times, you know, I work as a handyman. Around here, there's a lot of people who just want your work for charity. Yeah? They want your work, and you know this, you're a handyman too. People just want you to work for charity. They want you to work for free. This happens all the time around here. It doesn't matter if they go, oh, poor me, I'm old and I'm sick and no one can help me. And I just own 2 houses in Byron Bay that's worth $6 million. But I don't get any money coming in, so can't you just come around and fix everything? And you go around, and I remember saying to my dad, I got really confused. I was like, oh, like, I should really be helping them though, because, you know, this is a third factor. She's an old lady, she needs help, you know what I mean? But it's like I'm going around doing 3 hours work for 1 hour's pay, and it's like, you know, and then the problem with that is it was then causing stress on my work as a missionary, because I was then kind of broke, which made it hard to run the group, because I'm having to work more hours to make up for the fact that I'm wasting 2 or 3 at her house every fortnight. Do you understand what I mean? So the group that actually really needs my attention is suffering because a lady at work is playing my self-love. Yeah? She's playing my heartstrings. Oh, poor me. And my father said, you need to actually select the charity that you're doing. In this sense, you're actually teaching the third factor. With her, I'm not teaching her to fish, I'm just giving fish. And as my father said, you're working really, if it interferes with your work on teaching people to fish, then stop doing it. Because that's not what you're here for. I'm not here to give fish, I'm here to teach to fish. So I actually don't have time for that. And you can see that however you want. I've had people argue me down on that and say, oh, well, you know, you should do it. But the reality is, you actually have to notice that, because there are huge amounts of people like that. In the Gold Coast, I was talking to, I can't remember, someone in my group recently. We used to always do our classes completely by donation. But in the Gold Coast, I put $10 just from day one. You know why I did that? Because of the amount of people who just had nothing to do on a Monday night. And I would have these people come in and they just sit there and they would argue with every single class, every single time I talk about the ego, and they go, oh, but you know, the ego, do you really need to work on it. You know, if I didn't work on my ego, I never would have kicked my bloody cheating ex-husband out. You know what I mean? And every single class I'd be trying to go deeper, and then I started to realize, wait a minute, do these people, is this serious? Like, do they really need this, or are they just looking for something to do on a Monday night? So I put the $10, they all left. Literally next week. That was it. They just all left. And all the people who say were really serious, some of them are still in Gnosis. And it's like, because, you know, that's a stupid sacrifice. You see what I mean? I'm wasting my time. I'm giving all my time to this person who doesn't actually have any fruits. They're not providing any fruits. There's no results in their work and their behavior. And it's the same thing. If you're giving all of your time and efforts, you know, it's the same thing at work or something. You know, like if you have to give all of your time and effort to one person, they do, you know, they understand this even in a materialistic sense. You know, like if you're running a cafe and you've got someone who's just, you know, comes in, he gets the one coffee and sits there the entire day on their on the company Wi-Fi because they don't want to work, they don't want to pay for Wi-Fi at home. Often the cafe else, they don't come back because the person isn't serious. It's not a worthy sacrifice. You're sitting somewhere, if you are busy enough, you're sitting somewhere that like 5 other people could, you know, we could have made, 20 people could have walked through. And you know, that person always says the same thing. They're always like, oh, you don't care, you only care about money, you only care about this, you only care about that, you know? Yeah. Anyway. Anything else, or is dinner? Good? Okay, let's go. That's it. Dinner. And then I think we have is it a fire tonight?
Yes.
Okay, fire tonight. Huh? I don't know how, what's your welcome?
どういたしまして。どういたしまして。
どういたしまして。どういたしまして。Okay, come on.
And
はじめまして。